Diego, man, I got to tell you, it's been an honor for me to be able to know you and to know your family uh, more intimately than perhaps other people get to. And one of the big tragedies in this world is the fact that people that are so frantically looking for good, solid people can't find them, and when they see them, they almost think that they tend to misunderstand them because of their perceived aggressiveness or things of that nature, and they have a hard time compartmentalizing the difference between, that we live in such a tragic time as this, but also knowing who their friends are and who their enemies are. So I really appreciate you joining with me today. And this discussion, I really want to talk about Idaho, the political landscape, as you're aware of, what our options are, and clearly, dispelling the garbage that's surrounding Ammon Bundy. Now, according to my professional position, I'm not allowed to endorse candidates, but by golly, I'm telling you, I mean, if I have to talk about people's positions, then so be it. That's what I'll do. And I think I'm more inclined to be able to help people understand the positions of candidates so that they can make their own decisions without me telling them what to do, because telling people what to do is not consistent with freedom, right, man?
That's exactly right, brother. Amen to that.
So I did, as we were talking about before you were recording, I did pull a list of these issues. I did have an interview with them for about 2 hours. We ended up covering these, but you bring a different level to things, even than I do. And even so, it's still a different perspective. And it's so important that we do this and help people understand what Idaho is up against. And you have a vested interest, even though now you're living in Florida. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate you and what you guys have done for Idaho, and what your family has endured and the sacrifices that they put up with. So let's get into this and let's hammer down, shall we?
Let's do it, brother. I'm in.
All right. So I don't know how you want to do this. I think we were off to a pretty good start before we got recorded. If you want to really kind of go into the issues, I think we can do that too. Even though
what I just want to do before we get started, bro, if you don't mind, is I just want to, for all the people who are in Idaho who are watching this and listening to this, I want to give you my very last plea for you guys, for Idahoans. I'm gone. I left Idaho. We live in Florida now. And I'm an international traveler. I now do business around the country, around the world and in and out of the country. But some would say, well, Diego, what difference does it make to you? You don't care about Idaho. You bailed on us. So you're right. I totally bailed on you guys. I'm out. I'm gone. However, here's the reason why it matters. It is because liberty matters. It is because freedom matters. And if you take a look at the United States of America, too many people are saying, hey, we're losing our country. That's such nonsense. It's complete idiocy. We've already lost the country. The country as a whole is gone. And for those guys who live in Idaho, I got a sad reality for you too as well. For those of you guys who think that you're losing a battle and that you're losing Idaho and you're losing the conservative way that Idaho was and is, et cetera, you're also totally mistaken. It's a loss. You've already lost Idaho. You have one shot at recovery. And we can go down a list of how and why I say that, because you would have to be completely ignorant. And by ignorant, I don't mean stupid. I mean unaware of the reality of what is in Idaho right now for you to think that, it's going down. It's already fallen off the cliff. You have to recover it. And you only got one chance to restore that. And I'm saying all that to say there's a handful of states, maybe a half a dozen at most, where we have hope for preserving liberty in the United States of America. Now, a lot of people define liberty many different ways. I think the only way we should define it is historically through the Constitution, how we defined it in the Declaration of Independence. Independence is liberty. And also in our U.S. federal constitution and the various state constitutions as well, pretty well defined liberty as they should be in those states. But I'm going to give people the easiest definition of liberty that I've ever found, that when you're talking even with complete uneducated fools, they get this instantaneously. And that is this: if you have to ask permission to do something, you are not free. It is as simple as that. Anytime you have to ask permission to do something, you are not free. It is just that simple. A free man asks nobody permission to do what he wants to do. So I have 5 children. Several of them are grown up. They're on their own. They've moved out there on their own. They don't have to ask dad permission to do anything anymore. Why? Because they're free of my rule. But I have 2 sons who still live with me. They're not free. They want to do something, they got to ask me for permission, because they're not free, brother. You understand what I'm saying? Now, if I want to business and I have to ask the government for permission, I'm not free. If I want to sell something, I have to ask them permission, I'm not free. If I want to travel and I have to ask for permission, I'm not free. If I want to take care of my body and either do something to my body or not do something to my body, and I have to get permission from a bureaucrat, don't tell me that you're free. If you have to get permission from the government to have a church service, you're not free. If you have to get permission to go to the park, you are not free. If you have to have permission to open the doors to your business, you are not free. And these are all the things that I'm describing exist in Idaho. Idaho is not free and America is not free. Those specific examples I gave were specific examples about the state of Idaho, yet people still are going to think, but I go to church and my friends are good LDS people and we're all really nice people who love freedom and liberty, so we're Republicans, we're free. You're not free. You're not, because you live in a permission-based society in Idaho. And as long as it's permission-based, you are not free. It is as simple as that.
It's true. It's true, man. And I don't know, it's been such a push because I think people, I'm reminded when you were mentioning the Declaration of Independence of that particular portion in there where it talks about the fact that we're going to put up with quite a bit before anybody ever fights back. And we're experiencing absolute evidence of that. I mean, for crying out loud, we've got the Republican GOP establishment in the state of Idaho that's calling people like you and I anti-government extremists because we're adhering to the principles of liberty. And I find that completely ironic and completely sickening in the fact that you have these statists that actually believe that that's the better way to go. And that's really what our founders had in mind when they created this, this nation for people to come here and enjoy the freedom that we have.
Yeah, so, not just right-wing extremists, brother, but domestic terrorists. So exactly, anybody who is contrary to their narrative, you're a domestic terrorist. And now in any other generation, such a claim would be laughable. We'd all laugh. Look at these idiots saying such ridiculous things that nobody would believe. But now it's not laughable anymore because we have a generation of such complete and utter ignorant people, not necessarily stupid. Sure, plenty are stupid, but just totally ignorant, meaning unaware. They just don't know. And they absorb propaganda like a sponge. And therefore, whatever is on popular media, whatever is repeated all the time in the news media, in legacy media, and all this other conventional corporate media, they just absorb it and they buy into it. And so when you say to someone, Tom Munds is a domestic terrorist, oh my goodness, Tom Munds wants to blow us up. And they instantly think that in their mind. They have no idea what the truth is. They think Ammon Bundy is a terrorist. They think he wants to blow people up, which I've talked to Ammon about this at length. And we laugh about it because I carry a firearm with me 24/7. Right? I always have a gun. You come around me, I have a gun and I'm going to shoot you. No, I'm just kidding. But I could if I wanted to. But I'm not going to unless you are a threat to me or my family or somebody else. However, Ammon Bundy, the great domestic terrorist, this guy doesn't even carry. He believes in firearms. He is a pacifist. He is the most warm, huggable, fuzzable little, teddy bear like you ever met. It's hilarious that people are so ignorant that they turned like Santa Claus into a terrorist. And that's not to say that Ammon is not a strong man, just the opposite. He's a very strong man, but he's a non-violent man. He's as close to the white Martin Luther King as you're ever going to find in your life. And
my family, and they couldn't believe. And when my wife met Lisa, it was amazing. I mean, she's like, oh my gosh, she just couldn't believe how great she was. And so we got a chance to meet the family. It was wonderful.
That's right. But propaganda will have people to believe the opposite. And before you go to the next point, I just want to make one super fast point that we could talk about all day, but we won't. And that is, you said these statists want this, that, and the other, and you went down the line. I want to define really quick for our audience what a statist is, because too often these terms get all thrown around and people assume a statist is a liberal. People assume a statist is a leftist or a progressive or a Democrat. And while many of them are, and I would even go so far as to say most of them are statists, the reality is, and this is the danger of the state of Idaho, and it's one of the reasons why we left. The vast majority of Idaho Republicans, unfortunately, are statists. And let me define what a statist is. A statist is somebody who looks to the government as the solution to any and all of society's problems. A statist is somebody who has inadvertently or intentionally exalted the state above all other matters inappropriately. So, for example, virtually all people who get a check from the government and this is everybody, literally everybody who gets a check from the government is a statist because they see the state as a solution to all things. This means police officers, even the good ones, are generally statists. Teachers, even the good ones. I have some teachers in my past who I love almost as much as my mother, but it doesn't change the fact that they were all statists. Every nurse, every doctor virtually, because you cannot separate modern day healthcare, St. Luke's, St. Al's, the idea that these are private entities is the greatest, myth of all the state of Idaho. These guys are not just government subsidized. They're basically arms of the government, funded by the government, doing the government's bidding. And so all these doctors and nurses, they are statists. In Idaho, we have a tremendous amount of government employees at the Idaho, the nuclear laboratory and all the things that we have in Eastern Idaho and all the other things that are federal projects. There's so many government employees working in Idaho, and the vast majority of them are Republicans. They go to church. Their dad was a Republican. My dad was a fireman. My mom was a teacher, and they were raised, on the pew, and they went to church with their pastor who was a Republican city councilman or something like this. And all these people exalt the government. They all want the government to do first and to be first, and they want you to obey the government, and it's statism. When somebody comes along and says, you know what? Government has become out of control, corrupt, overbearing, and is not obeying the Constitution. We need to reduce government. We need to eliminate entire sections of the government. We need to take all these areas of the government that are unconstitutional and contrary to the principles of freedom and get rid of them or minimize them. All those statists throw up in arms. Oh my goodness, this guy's crazy. He's a domestic terrorist. And that is what Ammon Bundy represents to so many Republican statists. He's a threat to their very existence. Now, the reality is they're a threat to freedom. And that's the way we should be looking at it. It's not that people like Ammon Bundy or yourself are threats to their existence, but those people are threats to freedom and liberty. Therefore, they are threats to our existence. Those people are against the American public.
It's also important to recognize the difference between what I would consider an offensive and a defensive war. Now, granted, in every war, you've got people that are launching the offensive, and then you have the other people that are left to defend themselves. I've tried to explain to these statist type folks and, well, everybody in general, and the fact that we are not, the idea that somehow we are the aggressors, therefore we are the terrorists, because I believe terrorists are the aggressors typically. Liberty has always been about defending liberty. It's never been on the offense anymore, aside from the fact that we were meant to hold government accountable to certain, to the few and defined powers. But this idea that somehow we are now the aggressors is beyond all comprehension to me. Right?
It's such a great point. It's such a great point because as liberty-minded people, what is the ultimate thing we all want? We want government to leave us alone. And what statism wants is they want to be able to get into your life and force you to do things. It's all about force. They want to force you to pay more taxes, force you to accept the gay agenda, force you to put vaccines into your body that you don't want, force you to expose your children to a bunch of freaky teachings and doctrines. They want to force things on you. We just say, leave us alone. I'll educate my own kids. I'll feed my own body. I'll take care of my own health. I'll do everything on my own. I don't want anything to do with you guys. You leave me alone. And somehow the idea of you just being left alone is terrorist mindedness to them. I mean, just think about it. They want to use the force of government to get into your life and to mess with you. And so that's exactly right. What you're saying, it's offensive. They're wanting to take the offense. We're not aggressors. We just say, hey, leave me alone. Take a look at the whole Baby Cyrus case that most people are aware of. We just want the government to leave us alone. We'll take care of our own children. We'll take care of our own family. But the government says, no, we're going to come in and take your kid away from you. We're going to come in and we're going to do what we say is best for you and for your kid, even if it ultimately means killing your child or putting your child in the hands of some freaks. That's what they're doing. They're doing it the entire country over. It's government aggression. The government is the aggressor. Us on the other side, the liberty-minded people, we want to be left alone. Just leave us alone and we'll live happy and free. It's pretty darn simple.
We'll pay taxes that are unconstitutional, and we'll subject ourselves to things that are beyond government control to some degree, right? I mean, we ultimately
it's hilarious you mentioned that because it's true. Most liberty-minded people, including us, we do things contrary to our belief, just like paying a bribe. It's just more hassle than it's worth to fight against it. So here's the bribe. You know, if you travel to Mexico, which I do quite often, people are aware of the fact that the police will pull you over on the road, and the way to get out of a traffic ticket is you just slip them a 20 and get on with your life. Well, I don't believe in that. I think it's wrong for people to be asking for a bribe, and we all know that it's immoral. The Bible tells us that to receive a bribe or to ask for a bribe is immoral, but that's receiving it on that side. But we pay it. We pay it. Why? Because it's easier just to give them $20 and get on with your life than it is to fight the entire thing, recognizing you got a corrupt government that's going to back them up anyhow. Well, it's the same thing in the United States. It's just a much higher level. Instead of $20, it's $20,000. It's $200,000. And the force of government and the aggression is just much higher and much stronger. So what you're saying is true. We usually are willing to go along with a certain level or a certain measure of oppression if it allows us to live our lives to a certain level of freedom that we will say, okay, I'll just leave it all alone right now because I'd rather spend time with my family, having a barbecue, eating, having a good time, loving life, than taking all that same time and bandwidth and fighting a bunch of losers and corrupt morons and immoral, wicked men who are going to burn in hell for all eternity. Yeah. Just thought I'd add that in there, by the way.
Well, and I love it actually, because those are the more articulate side of the way I believe. You know, one of the things that I think that we can all say is that, and because we've been active in our area, is the tremendous amount of apathy. And, you know, you may know more about human nature than I do, but I'm telling you what, Diego, what I'm experiencing now is unlike anything that I've experienced in the last 20 years of being as active as I can be. The apathy, I don't know if it's the fear, people's displacement of reality, if you will. I don't even know how to be able to, when I was speaking at the rally the other day, the one thing I had talked about is I don't think there's anything I can say to get you off the couch. Because if there was, it's say. It's really what I might be able to say that will help convict others to be able to have God elevate them out of the couch rather than me. What do you say to that?
You know, brother, you mentioned earlier the concept of human nature. And yes, I've dedicated a significant portion of my life to studying human nature. That is why I comment on it on a regular basis. And so everything you're describing right now is the unfortunate reality of human nature. We do live in a fallen world. Everybody, including you and me, we're fallen individuals. And so we can't assume or believe that people are going to do the right thing. People have to do the right thing because there's a reason to do it. And unfortunately, the number one reason that people typically use or have to do the right thing is personal gain. So people will do something for their own benefit, for their own self-interest. And if it's for their own self-interest, that's okay. If it's for their own personal gain, you know, there's a line that you could be crossing on there. But in this particular case, when you say you can't get people to get up to do something or do the right thing or what have you, it is because of this fallen nature. And nobody articulated it in a political sense better, in my opinion, than George Washington, our very first president, the father of our nation. Most people are unaware because they got a government education. They know nothing about our founding fathers. Washington, other than the story of the cherry tree. Oh, looks like I lost video there for a second, huh? Let's take a look at what's going on there. Here, let me turn my video back on there, brother. I don't know what happened. It just shut off. It looks like the NSA is tapping into our feed and trying to shut us down here, brother.
We're doing good.
That would only be funny if we knew that it was not true, but we have to know that it is true. So, So hello, Agent Carlos. We know you're there paying attention, watching, so enjoy it. Anyhow, George Washington stated very clearly in his farewell address that it was, I call it George Washington's prophecy, but it's his farewell warning to the United States people, that he warned people against what he felt was the greatest danger to the American political free landscape. And that was what he called the spirit of party. Back then it was the Federalists and the Whigs, right? And then we got, the parties have changed over time, until finally we ended up with the two corrupt parties that we have today. But his recognition was, in their day, these men who were good men, who believed otherwise in so many of the same things, who had so many of the same goals and so many of the same aspirations, yet they put themselves in cliques. We're over here in this little clique called Party A. You're over here in this little clique called Party B, the Federalists, the Whigs, the Democratic Republicans, which they were called way back then. And everybody was fighting each other for these little itty bitty divisions. these little unbelievable minor divisions. You see this in the church world. Why are there so many denominations out there? Because two guys who have the same beliefs about the Bible 99% of the time, but one issue out of 100, one issue they see different on. We're splitting this church. We're going this way. We're starting our own denomination. And they identify their entire life on that one single solitary difference they have with everybody else. They split off and start a new denomination, and it just becomes a life of division. George Washington warned us against this. He said it's a spirit of party. And if we allow this spirit of party to continue, it will destroy freedom and the free political landscape that we have in America. And so what you're seeing here, Tom, is exactly that. Idahoans are Republicans first. They're not America first. They're not freedom first. They're Republicans first. They love the party. They're addicted to the party. Why do you think they support people like Larry Craig, Mr. Dancing Bathroom Boy, who's going to go into the bathroom, confess to soliciting gay sex in a public bathroom? Think how many California Republicans have moved to Idaho who don't even know that story, don't even know that Idaho has a U.S. senator who was convicted and confessed, rather, to soliciting gay sex in a public bathroom. How unbelievably disgusting is this? But he's a Republican. So all the Republican Party gathered around him and all loved him and protected him. And he's still, you know, an image and a presence at Republican events to this day. Larry Craig, keep your kids away from him. Keep your husbands away from him. You know, the old song, you know, hide your wife, hide your kids, and hide your husbands. Because Larry Craig and the Republican Party is coming after everybody in your life. How can we defend people like Fred Martin, whose voting record is worse than virtually every single Democrat in the Idaho State Senate, who himself was under investigation for God knows only what, for trying to get in, for sneaking into high school girls' bathroom to do God only knows what. And that's a public story. These are all, we can go down the line and see these are what the Republicans have been doing in Idaho, and nobody cares. As long as they're Republicans, they will support them. And so what I would say to anybody watching this today, I challenge you on a moral basis. Are you moral or are you Republican in Idaho? Because you can't be both. Now, you can be a member of the Republican Party and be a moral person, but you have to choose which you identify first. Are you going to identify yourself as a moral person who makes decisions based on morality, or you're going to identify yourself as, I'm a Republican, we've got to protect the Republican Party, we got to make sure the Republican Party is strong, we got to make sure the Republican Party is in power, and all we're doing is defending the Republican Party? Well, that's complete nonsense. I mean, I'm very glad that Dorothy Moon was elected the chair of the Republican Party. I think it's a huge step in the right direction, but it doesn't fix things, it doesn't solve things. It certainly helps, but the Republican Party, as far as I'm concerned, is meaningless. What you're going to be judged on, each and every one of us individually, is our individual decisions, our individual lives, our individual actions, not the actions of your party. So make decisions based on truth. Don't fall prey to what George Washington warned us about. George Washington warned us that this is going to be the destruction of America, and you're watching it happen in Idaho right now, 200 plus years after the fact.
Well, we ended up with, I was on a Facebook this morning, and I had posted something on there, and the response was, and you can almost wait for it whenever you post something like this, is, well, although I don't agree, who am I to judge? And I know that there's no better person to give you a lead on than you on something like that. You know, I call it moral deviancy or moral relativism, where, you know, not only does society become relative, where truth no longer matters, but that's problematic biblically and historically. When you think somehow in the name of tolerance, you think you can get two major opposing forces to agree, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like saying, you know, if somebody wants to rape your child, who are you to disagree? You know, I mean, it's their thing. If somebody wants to, you know, cut your head off, I mean, yeah, I don't agree with that, but who am I to judge them? You know, if somebody wants to, and you can go down the list of all of these great immoralities, who am I to judge? If somebody wants to, lie under oath, you know, I don't agree with that, but who am I, you know, to judge them? And you go down the whole line. And this whole concept of not judging other people, you know, because then they quote Jesus out of context in Matthew, where he says, you know, judge not lest you be judged. He didn't say judge not. He was talking about being hypocrites. He's saying, if you're going to judge somebody, recognize that they're going to judge you. You're going to be judged by the same measure you're judging them. He's saying, don't be a hypocrite. He didn't say judge not, period. The entire context of there and the rest of it is, yes, you must judge, but judge righteous judgment. Finish the scripture. He tells you to, when you judge, judge righteously. And the way we judge righteously is we judge according to his law. We judge according to God's word. So we judge according to God's word. Yeah, homosexuality is wrong. Lying is wrong. Adultery is wrong. Fornication is wrong. We can go down the entire list of things. And from a perspective of freedom, I'll tell you right now, there's all types of moral issues that I oppose morally, but I don't want the government to intervene on. Look, I'm opposed to homosexuality 100%. I want the government going into people's homes and bedrooms and whatever. I mean, it's complete nonsense. But I'm opposed to people telling lies.
If we don't oppose, there's no standard. Isn't that right?
What's that?
America had established a standard.
That's
a moral,
right.
Political standard and things. And part of establishing that standard was laying forth laws, ordinances, principles that were consistent with who they were. When you start deviating from that, that's when things like countries collapse and things of that nature, right?
And that is a historical fact.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can take a look at all the great empires of the past, and before an empire falls, there is a huge collapse of morality in that country. Mm-hmm. And if you take a look at what's happening in Idaho today, it is not just mirroring what's happening on a national level, but it's like Idaho wants to be at the forefront. I mean, I have a friend of mine who is a German expat who lives outside of Germany because Germany is completely off the hilt. And this guy is pretty deep into a whole bunch of crazy stuff. And I'll just leave it at that. And he's always sending me crap about what's going on in the world. You know, this is going on here, this is going on here. And he's got his pulse on, you know, the dark corners of the internet and who knows what he's involved in. And every now and again, he sends me some stuff that I was like, wow, that's crazy. Well, that's crazy. But every now and again, in these deep, dark circles that he's in, Idaho pops up to the top. And he's always saying, why is Idaho so wicked and so corrupt? And it was just last week, he said to me, look at all these drag fests. Look at all this homo crap going on there in Idaho. What is wrong with Boise? What is wrong with Idaho? And he followed very closely the case with Baby Cyrus. And he was like, yeah, I knew it, dude. I knew you shouldn't live in that place because we had already, as everybody who pays attention knows, our family had decided to leave Idaho way before the Baby Cyrus case. And that was kind of, you know, people don't know that Baby Cyrus was kidnapped 4 days before the moving trucks were set to pull up to our house. Oof. And so,
you've been rabble rousing for a long time. It's weird that they would pick such a time as just before you were about to leave. I found that almost orchestrational.
Yeah, we've been rabble rousing for 11 years that we've been in Idaho. So yeah. And brother, I have a lot of things about Idaho that I love. There's so many, I mean, not just many of the people who became close friends, but there are certain elements, of course, of Idaho that are beautiful things. And it's sad to see it all lost. And this is why I was, you know, so grateful to come across people like Ammon Bundy, who's like, you know, I'm going to fight to the very end. I'm going to do everything I can to fight back. And to see the statism and the spirit of statism in Idaho, the Idaho Republican Party rise up against him. It is absolutely identical to what happened with Donald Trump, period. Now, whether you love or hate Donald Trump, that's irrelevant to this conversation. What is relevant is this. Who hated him more? Was it the Republicans or the Democrats who hated him more in 2016 before he got elected?
My statement, man, the Republicans for sure.
Because he was a bigger threat to all of them. Yep. And sure enough, once he got elected, it showed that that's exactly what he was. But then all those Republicans all turned around. All of a sudden, they became little Donald Trump worshipers, right? And all of a sudden, because now he was the kingmaker, so now they had to, you know, butter up to him. But what got him elected was that the people loved him. He spoke to the people, and he represented something to the people that the people wanted. Whether you like any of that or not, that's the reality. In Idaho, we have the same thing happening. The Republican establishment cannot stand Ammon Bundy. And he's a non-statist.
You know what's really weird about that too, is they hate. So they make claims now since Dorothy took over the state party that the GOP has been taken over by the Birch Society. And so,
if only that was true, that would be so awesome.
In this interesting dynamic, we're looking at the fact that the Republicans hate us more than the Democrats do. and one hasn't been able to conclude yet. Nobody likes the John Birch Society. Nobody likes Ammon Bundy, but everybody likes Trump. And I found tremendous irony in that, right? Because
it's hilarious.
A lot of the positions that Trump has taken are the same positions that the rest of us are taking. It's just the fact that he ended up being in the limelight more so than the rest of us. Right? Or
well, Trump was definitely a once in a lifetime candidate because something we're seeing with Ammon's campaign, and we're seeing this all over the country. I've seen this all over the country. Here in Florida, it's the same thing. It is unfortunate, but there is a sad reality that in order for somebody who is as totally departed and disconnected from the political elite as Donald Trump to get elected, or as Tom Munds, or as Ammon Bundy, I mean, all you guys, how do you like that? I put you guys all together in the same bucket. Yeah, all you guys are disconnected from the political elite. The only way you could become elected is you have to be independently wealthy. So for someone to be able to really get the message out there, to repeat it enough, because with government education being as it is, the average American citizen can't reason. They lack the ability to reason or think. Therefore, the only thing they respond to is repetitive information, saying the same thing over and over and over and hear it again and again and again and again. So whoever spends more money wins. It shouldn't be that way. Think about it. When we talk about money in politics, money should not control politics, because I don't care how much money Barack Obama throws in ads and mailers to my house, I'm never going to vote for him. Because my mind is contrary to his position. My heart, my soul is contrary to him. When your mindset, your voting habits and your vote itself can be influenced by a repetitive message, it just means you have no core. It means you have no center. It means you have no belief system. It means you're literally, like Rush Limbaugh used to say, you're a young skull full of mush. Your mind is full of mush. Whether you're young or you're old, your mind is full of mush. You can't even make your own decisions. So the perfect example of this, brother, is BLM. The idea that people actually believe, people literally believe Ammon Bundy joined and or supports the Black Lives Matter movement is so far beyond the pale, is so unbelievably ridiculous, is so stupid that it just demonstrates to people, like, like the old jokes when we were kids, when you have someone go like this, loser, you're a loser. For somebody to say that, it's like wearing a dunce cap or having the L sign on their head, that you're such an idiot. How could you be so dumb? I mean, Ammon Bundy is literally the lifelong sworn enemy of all BLMs, because before the Black Lives Matter movement came out, BLM was the Bureau of Land Management. And those are the people who put Ammon Bundy in prison, who he fought against, and his family literally had a virtual war with, practically, right? And that's who BLM was. Now BLM is the Black Lives Matter movement. And here's the humorous part. You talk about contradictions. People will tell you Ammon Bundy is a white supremacist. Most people think he's a white Aryan Brotherhood supremacist, an Aryan Nations white privileged racist. And then after the same sentence and breath, they go, oh, and he supports BLM. He's in support of Black Lives Matter. What? What are you even talking about? How are you guys so dumb? You're so dumb. I can't handle it. It's literally so dumb. Oh, no, it's true. I saw a video. Yeah, I saw the video you're referencing too. Watch it. Everything he said in that video, not only do I agree with, but Ammon should not be ashamed of. He shouldn't run away with it from it at all. All he said in the video, and for anybody who wants to watch it, is he's saying, for those of you who think that Black Lives Matter is going to take away your freedoms, you're dumb. It's not Black Lives Matter who's going to be taking away your freedoms. And then he goes off to talk about who is going to be taking away your freedoms. And that was it. That was what he said. And because he said that, they take things out, they twist it, and they tell people, guess what? Ammon Bundy supports Black Lives Matter. He joined Black Lives Matter. He's deeply connected with Black Lives Matter. Oh my goodness, you're that stupid. How could you be that dumb? Literally. Go ahead.
I met with leaders myself of Black Lives Matter just to be able to figure out what makes them tick. Of course, I could never find.
Oh, yeah, the leaders. Yeah. I remember.
Amazing. Well, we talked a lot about human nature, and we talked a lot about Idaho politics, and I love this. And as while we're talking, I'm thinking, gosh, how do you even title a video like this anyway to make sure that people actually watch it? But the purpose of and I love talking to you anyway. I mean, I would love to just chat with you all the time, and I'm just glad you gave me the opportunity to visit. But
well, just give me a holler, dollar. We'll chat. Come on down to Florida. We're over here. We actually have freedom. We don't ask permission to do stuff down here.
Yeah, I know. I heard Misty was down there too. I'm like, oh yeah, damn, I should have just jumped in her suitcase. But
that's it, baby.
For all intents and purposes here, because of the fact that the election is so important and things and all of that, I really wanted to arm people with the kind of information that they needed. And I needed them to be able to hear from somebody that is closer to him than I am. Now, I consider myself pretty close to him and, in the movement and things of that nature, but I don't know that there are too many people that I know that are closer to him than you are. And I think it's really important for you to be able to share. And with me, maybe the hope that I had in visiting with you is perhaps I might be able to reach out to expand our circle of influence for those people that don't know you. And so I really want to be able to focus on, on Bundy and the positions that he had and things of that nature, and include any of your comments that you felt like we were kind of doing before with with BLM and things of that nature. And doing the video with him, I'm hoping that it comes out soon, where people can go through the timelines and to figure out his position in his own words. But I still think that it helps coming from you too. And that's the reason why I wanted to visit with you too. So I don't know if we just go through some of these real quick. Or whatever.
Yeah, let's go through them. I'd be honored to do so. I'm not speaking for Ammon. I'm going to speak as his brother, his brother from another mother. They say we all look alike. So,
yeah, well, and you're not even white. So that just completely is mind bending to me.
How does that work? Not only am I not even white, but my brother is a white supremacist BLM member. I mean, it's just unbelievable. This is the world that we're living in today.
And I saw your shirt at the rally and it said, did it say brown people for Trump?
Mexicans for Trump.
Mexicans for Trump.
Yeah, don't confuse brown people. Brown people could be anybody who's brown.
I know, right?
But I'm a Mexican, so let's get it right.
My tolerance.
Yeah.
Well, so he talked a lot about the border walls, and I found his position rather interesting. And they had basically said, the opposition. Well, and I have to say this in reference. My concern, Diego, is that the liberty movement isn't what it was when we were involved in a long time ago. What it has become now is something that I've rather distanced myself from, because they're inconsistent and they incorporate a lot of the garbage that we're talking about. One of those is I'm constantly getting stories about, I'm not voting for governor. I got an email from a guy up north. I'm not voting for governor. No solution, no problem, no details, nothing. I've got people in the liberty movement that have openly said they're going to vote for Brad Little.
And what's the reasons they give you for that? So I already know what they are, but just go ahead and say them and we'll discuss them.
Well, and I'm baffled because hardly any of them understand the globalist connection or the connection to CCP or just the to totalitarian edicts that we have experienced in that awesome video you did about the unconstitutional stuff that Brad Little did. I honestly, I think the reason why they're not doing it is because they're scared and they believe the propaganda. Am I right?
I definitely think there's a part of that. However, there is a reality, brother, of there's just a reality, again, of human nature is defending their own ego. Let me give you an example. So in my opinion, the greatest evil that we have in the United States of America today is government schools. And the reason I believe that is because that is the source and the foundation of everything. If everybody was educated, they could think for themselves and we could not be controlled. You cannot control people who are educated. And secondarily, that is a direct affront to the family unit. This is a government coming out and saying, we control your kids. And if we can't control them physically, we're going to control their minds and we're going to control what they think. And so I definitely believe that government school is the biggest problem we have in America today. And the average person would be against you saying something like that up until COVID. COVID, all of a sudden, it kind of changed a whole bunch of things. They started realizing how much force there is involved. But I still would say this. If you come out and tell somebody the biggest problem we have is public school today, and public schools are a disaster, you don't learn anything from public school, you're not getting an education there, et cetera, et cetera. Instead of people considering facts, considering reality and considering truth, they instantly take offense because of two things. I got a government education. Are you saying I'm stupid? And number two, I send my kids to public school. Are you saying I hate them? And you're not talking about that. You're just talking about these things are bad. Here's a whole bunch of facts. It's like me telling you that, if you eat such and such food, that food is bad for you. And then they get offended. I eat that food. Are you saying that I'm stupid? I feed my kids that food. Are you saying that I'm poisoning my kids? Right?
Yeah.
And so ego takes over. And whenever ego takes over, people cannot think rationally. And so Ammon Bundy left the Republican Party. Believe me. Now, he joined it and then left before. If Ammon was right now the Republican candidate, if the only thing that was different was he was a Republican candidate and Brad Little went independent, all those same people would be supporting Ammon Bundy, and they would be against Brad Little. In neither case would it have anything to do with their positions, with their belief system, with how they would operate as the executive of the state. It would just be, well, Ammon Bundy is the Republican, so I'm supporting him. And how dare Brad Little betray us and leave the Republican Party? He's a traitor. He's against it. And they would be so against him. So this is all has to do with human nature and ego. People who are Republicans, their ego will not allow them to vote for someone who's not a Republican. The same way people can't listen to logic about public school because they went to public school, they can't listen to logic about somebody who's not a Republican who left the Republican Party, joined it, and then left because they're Republicans. And so I cannot overstate how much ego has a part to do with this.
Yeah, that's true. And, the media and the government carrying that narrative never ceases to amaze me. And the fact that here we are, people openly believe that what they hear out of the television is a lie, but somehow what comes out of the radio is the honest to God truth. And I'm honestly baffled by it. I mean, he covered a couple of the issues that we covered, and I don't know how long the video is or whatever, but I'll label off some of these and you can pick off any of them you want. But they had accused that now this is a list, this is the laundry list of the people that were in the liberty movement that are voting for Brad Little for these reasons. Okay. Support for border wall, legalization of pot. He didn't support deportation. He supported BLM. Even why he moved from the GOP to the independent, even though I thought that was brilliant. The fact that he was an anarchist, the fact that he might have compared himself to Jesus or Martin Luther King, the fact that Pam Hemphill was told that he told Pam not to record him in a public square, as public as he is. The accusations that he told people that if they didn't agree that they were racists, the fact that Facebook is now somehow, Ammon Bundy must have deleted his own Facebook because Facebook doesn't censor people. I mean, this is the lunacy that we're actually dealing with. And really, those are really all. Some of the other ones get pettier than that. But those are the issues that I had to deal with when talking about, look, I'm not going to endorse a candidate. I don't want to tell anybody what to do. But you know what? I have the right as an activist with the time that I've spent making sure that people understand the right positions of the right candidates and walk through this garbage that people are actually buying into. And I honestly can't think of being with anybody better in talking about that than you. So I appreciate that. And let's do this. I actually would appreciate the opportunity to go through those one by one and talk about each one of them. We can do it quickly. I won't go long. And of course, you guys can take this video and you can timestamp it and tell people, here's what we're going to talk about this, so that people aren't going to have to listen to some video for over an hour, but it's not a big deal if we do. However, let me preface all this by sharing with folks that yes, people know that I am on the Ammon Bundy campaign, that he's a friend of mine, that I have worked with him and I'm supporting him and I do anything and everything I can to support him. But before we get into this, there's two things I want to tell everybody that probably I know for a fact that people are not aware of. Thing number one is this. I believe personally that it is one of my personal duties and one of my personal callings to support those people who would be liberty-minded candidates for political office. It's something I want to do and something I'm willing to do, and I've done it every single year in Idaho since 2012 and forward. Many people might remember, a lot of people who met me and my family for the first time probably met us on the Russ Fulcher campaign. We were visible in his campaign, and, Russ had me out there, pumping up the crowd and getting them fired up for when he was to hit the stage afterwards. We did plenty of town halls that you can still see on YouTube today. And we supported and sponsored as many different liberty-minded candidates as we possibly could. You might remember in 2014, and I'll just kind of give people a really, really, really quick review about this because most people are ignorant to the fact that in 2014,
we had a very big and important election that year, because this was after Obamacare. It was there in 2012 when your best buddy, Butch Otter, rammed through Obamacare in Idaho. Now, for people wondering, what am I talking about? Well, Idaho, so everybody accepts Obamacare is just, it's part of life today, right? There was a time when all of America was against it. You might remember that time, Tom. You might remember that Obamacare created the Tea Party movement, that the Tea Party movement was in response to Obamacare, right? And so we know that that's what happened. That was the history of America. However, what people may not know is that Idaho was the only Republican state in America, the only one that rammed through a state healthcare exchange that gave us Obamacare at the state level. Every single other Republican state in America rejected Obamacare, but Butch Otter, controlled by IACI, the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry, the number one lobby there in Idaho, rammed it through in Idaho, and Idahoans freaked out, and Idahoans realized for the first time, oh my goodness, maybe we're not a conservative state. How did this happen? Now, so this huge rising up amongst conservatives in Idaho to get rid of the Republican establishment. So we had conservatives from top to bottom. We had Russ Fulcher was running for governor against Butch Otter. We had Jim Schmelik, who was running against non-binary Brad Little for the position of lieutenant governor, right? Then we had all, state controllers, superintendent. Every single state office had a conservative running against it, except for Secretary of State, which of course was won by Lawrence Denny, but that was because the previous Secretary of State was not running again. So that was an open seat. All of the other seats were all up for grabs, or not up for grabs. All the other seats, there was conservatives running against the existing state establishment officers. Then you take a look at the state representatives in the state Senate, all the way from top to bottom, man. There were dozens of liberty-minded candidates running for state offices all up and down the entire state. It was incredible. We thought, man, Idaho is going to be turned around. We're going to have a Republican governor. We're going to have Republican state officials. We're going to have, not just Republicans, conservatives. We had conservatives that were running against Mike Simpson, who's just the worst congressman of all time. And you want to talk about the example about human trash that describes the liberalism, leftism, progressivism. You got no better example than Mike Simpson. But all those Republicans will vote for him again and again and again because he's their Republican guy. He's their dude. And all the way down from top to bottom, people were running against all the establishment guys. And every single conservative lost in that election, every last one of them in 2014. I don't know if you remember, but that's what happened. Lawrence Denny, of course, became our Secretary of State.
That was our Fab Seven.
What's that?
We had flyers out everywhere for our choice of liberty candidates. That was That was when we had Chris Troupis and things too, right?
Oh, Chris Troupis was running for Attorney General back then. That guy was awesome. I still think that guy's probably the greatest man in Idaho. I'd vote for him for anything in Idaho. I'd vote for him for anything anywhere. He's fantastic, but he lost. Jim Schmelik lost. Russ Fulcher lost. We had Todd Hatfield running for state controller. Great guy. Lost. The superintendent of public instruction. We had a good guy there as well. He lost. All the state Senate candidates lost. All the representatives, all the good guys lost. Boom, all the way down. And this, to me, was the very first wake-up call for everybody. Dude, Idaho's not conservative. We are loaded to the brim with statists. The statists were protecting their own, which is why in this election, if you take a look at the math, the only way the math will work is if these Californians that everybody hates that are moving into Idaho, who are ignorant to the history of Idaho, if they vote principle instead of party. Because the existing math for the existing old head, old school party members of Idaho, it's just straight up statism. That is what Idaho is. It's a statist state. It's why Idaho has all these high taxes that even California doesn't even have a grocery tax, bro. What the heck?
What?
I mean, come on. Idaho is one of 5 states in the country. 5. 45 states do not tax their groceries. 5 do. Idaho's one of them. Don't tell me we're freaking conservative in Idaho. It's insane. It's completely insane.
It is.
We require a hairdresser to have over 2,000 hours of practice in her hairdressing before she's allowed. Before your wife or one of your daughters or anybody you know, a friend of yours, actually can shampoo somebody's hair and cut their hair, she has to get permission from the government to do so. Don't tell me you're free.
You only need 750 hours, though. No, actually, it's 1,500 hours to become a commercial pilot. Did you know that?
Yeah, and it's even less to get a license to kill somebody and shoot them to be a cop. Literally. So to get a license to kill somebody in Idaho legally is less than a pilot or a hairdresser. But remember, say it with me now. You're free. You live in a free country. Repeat after me. If you say it long enough, you'll start to believe it.
Yeah.
Idaho's conservative. Repeat after me. Say it again. So I start to say this. I've been supporting conservative candidates since day one, since I lived in Idaho. But there's two things people need to know. Number one, before I support somebody, I will not take a single dollar of profit from any of them ever in history. It is a personal belief of mine not to take money from the government for profit. I'm not going to profit off of government. I just will not profit off the government. I just don't believe in it. And even though I don't think that there's a moral issue with somebody, for example, I have a marketing company. We can make websites and videos and stuff like this. I have no problem with people taking money from candidates to do so. I just personally don't want to do it. I don't want to make personal profit off of government. I just don't believe in it. So therefore, before I started working with Ammon, there was two things that I let him know. Number one, I will not be a part of your campaign and support your campaign if you are going to lick your finger, test the waters, test the wind, and change your position based on what society says or what I'm not going to support a candidate who's going to bow to political pressure. Been there, done that, and I'm sick of it. Amen. And me and Ammon, I'm like, dude, and if you have a position that I disagree with, fine, it's your position. But what do I care? But if you're going to, and I got no problem, Tom, you and I can have a difference of opinion. That's fine. And we can agree to disagree and go our separate ways. However, if someone is going to, as a political candidate for political purposes, sacrifice your own belief, I can't support that as a person. I can't support you that way. And I won't do it. And he's like, don't worry, I'm not going to do that. And if I ever do, and you want to walk away from the campaign and wash your hands of me, I'm cool with that. So that was our agreement that we had when we got started. Right. And number two is the same thing. I wasn't going to take any money from his campaign, so I'm not going to benefit from it personally. And the reason why that's so important is because I believe when people are financially benefiting from somebody else on their campaign, no matter what you say, there's an influence there that you can't shake free of, because people don't want to kick back. They don't want to bite the hand that feeds them, and they don't want to resist the person who's paying the bills. And this is why statists are so dangerous, because they're getting paid by the government. So they're always going to defend and support the government, period. Yeah. And so
I got, and I love to do these, and I do them every week, but I've got to get out of here in about a half hour. So
okay, so let's go into those really quick. I want to say that as a reminder, and some people say, "Well, I saw on Ammon's report that he's paid Power Marketing, which that's Diego's company. He's paid him this X amount of dollars." Yes, all of those dollars that the campaign has paid to us are all for media buys. So Ammon's running ads on KBOI, Ammon's running ads or wherever else he's run them. Their campaign pays us. We then buy them because that's the way it works. You buy these ads through an agency. Our agency is the agency that did it. And all of that money transference was at zero profit. So we make no money off of any of it. So I'm saying all that to say, I'm not paid to say anything good about Ammon, number one. Number two, I'm only supporting him insofar and in so much as he's going to hold to the principles that he stands for. And so that is the reason why I respect him. He's a friend. He's a brother. But it's a matter of respect, and that's what we're here talking about. So hit those issues. I'll try to respond to every one of them in 60 seconds or less. And so go back to the top of that list, and we'll just go through them really, really fast.
Ammon and we went through them in detail, and then at the end, we tried to do a lightning round. It didn't work so well. So we'll try it again. Right. Okay. So, and I'll just ask the questions the way they were written. Do you support border walls?
Right. So Ammon has that listed there in his campaign website. And I'll tell you, this is the one I can't do in 60 seconds or less, simply because it's hard for somebody like me to make a comment on border walls. And the reason for that is people instantly think, well, you're a Mexican. So if you're a Mexican, you support Mexicans and you want all the Mexicans over here and you can't talk. And so instantaneously, it's like, I can't mention it. Just like you're a heterosexual, middle-aged, white, privileged male. So like you can't comment on anything about a black person or about a brown person
coming into my state. That's the position they're going to take, right?
What's that?
They might say that I don't like Mexican. Of course, I support borders because I don't want Mexicans coming up from the border, right? So either way, we're screwed.
They're going to say the opposite about me. They're going to say you want open borders because you want Mexicans coming here. Look, let me give people a perspective they've never heard before. All right, truly. Now, people are not going to be able to receive it because this is a brown guy. He's a Mexican. Well, I like to tell people all the time, I'm a real Mexican. Everybody you know is just a brown person, but I'm the only real Mexican you know. And by that, I mean this. I'm a dual citizen. I have citizenship in Mexico. I carry a Mexican passport. I have a Mexican business, a Mexican corporation, a Mexican address, a Mexican home. I am as Mexican as they come. I'm a true Mexican. And so everybody else, they're just brown people. There are people who live in the United States, but they're brown. They speak Spanish. And they were born or raised in the United States, et cetera. There are people who cross the border and come across, but here's what I can tell you. For years, many years, I hated Mexicans. My whole life, I hated Mexicans. And here's why. I didn't realize there was a difference between what we would now call Chicanos or Chicanos and Mexicans. Mexicans are people who are from Mexico. They live in Mexico. They're Mexican citizens. Chicanos are people who are brown. They have Mexican ancestry, but they were born and raised in America. And guess what? I'm going to be straight up with you guys and tell it just like it is. Chicanos are horrible people. They're violent. They have criminal tendencies. They don't have family values. I love it when people tell me, oh, we can win over the Mexicans because they have family values. And I laugh, I go, show me a Mexican that you know that's not dysfunctional, that their parents aren't divorced, that you don't have 3 generations of women raising children in the exact same house because they got knocked up by 3 different men. Their kids have 3 different last names. Show me anyone who's raising their kids with family values that aren't criminals, they're not in gangs, they're not norteños or sureños or what have you. They don't have tattoos of teardrops on their eyes, showing how many years they were in prison. That is the Mexico but they're family values. That's not family values. What is family values to you? I mean, my family are Mexicans. I can tell you right now that there's almost nobody. I can count on one hand how many family members I know of who are not divorced and messed up and have criminals and on and would actually maintain what we call true family values. And I'm part of that group. By definition, I would be a Chicano. I have since become what I would call a true Mexican. Okay, but that's a whole bunch of nonsense and BS. So all these Mexicans who live here in the U.S. who are not actual Mexicans, they're what we would call Chicanos. They're the worst representation of what a Mexican really is. When you come down to Mexico and you visit Mexico, in fact, all white people love to go to Cancun and Cabo San Lucas and Puerto Vallarta, and they go down and they go, oh, I love the people. They're so kind and they're so friendly and they're so nice and they're so service-minded and they're so peaceful and the food is so delicious. Yeah. And guess what? Those people, they don't ever want to come to America. None of them have any interest in coming to the United States. None of them. Do you know, Tom, that's a statistical fact for the last 5 years, that there's more legal migration of Americans to Mexico than there are Mexicans to America. Did you know that? More Americans are leaving the United States as expats living in Mexico than there are legal Mexicans leaving the United States to go to the leaving Mexico to go to the United States. Are you aware of that?
That's the cost of living, I think, right?
It's not just the cost of living, it's the standard of living. You have a higher standard of living. You can live at 2 to 3 times better standard of living for 1/2 the price. It's just unbelievable. Now I still have to say this. So you take this border wall. Why do we have a border wall and why are we even interested in it? Well, I understand the reality of the border wall from a perspective of security and national security. And to that end, I'm all in favor of it. Build one. So see if I care. I just could care less if we're going to have a border wall. However, there's 3 things I want to mention. Number one, if somebody wants to build a border wall, it is not because they're racist. Period. No matter what. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Donald Trump does not want to build a wall because he's a racist. Now, if you go down to Mexico and if you want to go and buy a house in Mexico, do you want to know what the number one feature for a home is in Mexico to make people want to buy that home?
If it has
dual security, that it has 2 fences, not one. You live in what's called a private community, and your own private community has a security entrance. So there's a huge wall around it. And then the entire community you live in has a secondary wall, one where you go into, and it's called doble seguridad, double security. So isn't it funny if you're going to ask a Mexican, hey, you live in a gated community, what we call a gated community in America, what they would call down there a privada. And you say, yeah, I live in a gated community. And how many walls does it have? Well, we have 2 walls. So who are you protecting yourself from? White people? Or are you protecting yourself from Mexicans who you think are going to rob you? Well, I mean, it's just, I'm not afraid of Mexicans, but, it's just for the sake of security. Oh, so if you want to have 2 walls to protect yourself from some Mexicans who might be bad, then that's smart. But if the president of the United States, whose responsibility is to protect his people, he's the commander in chief, if he wants to have 1 wall, he's a racist? How does that make sense? I never thought about that. Right? It's just complete insanity. And so it's just complete stupidity. So that's the first thing I say. Number 2, I have no problem with the concept of a wall for security reasons. But the third thing is this, and I understand Ammon's position for saying that he could care less if there's going to be a border wall, and he's not necessarily going to support one for twofold reasons. Number 1, he learned the difference between Mexicans and Chicanos when he was in federal prison. Because when he was in federal prison, they put him from time to time in an area, and you can ask him about it because we had a conversation about it many times, in an area where he stayed with all of these guys who were Mexican citizens who basically were only in prison because they broke immigration law. And he had if he had a choice but to be in a section of prison where there's just a bunch of murderers and rapists and drug addicts and drug traffickers, those guys were scary and dangerous. But when he got to be over here with a bunch of guys who they were just thrown in prison because they crossed the border illegally, he's like, man, these guys were great. They were friendly. They were nice. I like hanging out with those guys. And so he made lots of friends. So that's a reality. But let's ask the question, Tom, we all know that the country we live in is a land of immigrants. They all came across Staten Island, the whole works, the Statue of Liberty and all that. And they came across legally, and we all believe in this. We all believe in legal migration to the United States. We 100% believe in this. What we don't believe in is theft, and we don't believe in crime. So crime is some type of violent crime that happens against you, but theft can happen to your wallet, and it doesn't have to happen in your wallet directly. If the government's taking money from us and giving it to illegal immigrants, then we're all pissed, and rightfully so. I'm here to say, and I've said it for years, we do not have an illegal immigration problem. We have a welfare problem. These people would not be coming across the border if we didn't entice them to come. Amen. Fix the welfare problem, and the wrong people aren't going to come across anymore. And I've asked people before, I don't care how racist you are, if somebody comes to this country and they don't steal your stuff or harm you in any way, do you really care? And nobody cares. So the reason we're upset with illegal immigrants, whether they be brown or whether they be yellow or whether they be white or whether they be red, is we don't want people coming and stealing our stuff through taxes or harming us through criminal activity or violence.
And
that's the problem.
Does it?
That's exactly right. And that is who is doing it. So Ammon's position on, and here's the thing you're going to find about Ammon, even if people don't like him and they don't like that position because they are true neocons, right? They don't like that Ammon is consistent. Mm-hmm. If this guy believes in liberty, he believes in liberty. And that means you're not going to like what I have to say about marijuana because he's opposed to it. I'm opposed to marijuana. I am 100% opposed to marijuana. I think nobody should smoke it. Nobody should do it. As a preacher, it's my responsibility to preach against, the inebriation of you and your body, which should be the temple of the Holy Ghost. 100% opposed to it. But I'm 100% in favor of the decriminalization of marijuana because it's not the government's position to tell people what to do. As a pastor, as a preacher, as an evangelist, as a father, as a leader of your community, we as fathers, as civil leaders should be telling people, don't do drugs. We shouldn't be completely stripping the entire country of its rights in the name of fighting against those same drugs. It's a huge lie. It's a gigantic lie. And the war on drugs is a huge myth. But people are so ignorant. Ammon's not in favor of drugs, but he's not in favor of the war on drugs, which is destructive to America and destructive to American freedom. So therefore, Ammon, as everybody knows, he's LDS. He's a good Mormon boy. He's not in favor of drugs, of any drug that's whatsoever. At my house, brother, we drink tequila. We drink wine. We drink wine for communion, and we also I have no problem people drinking alcohol because there's nothing in the Bible against drinking alcohol. There's only something in the Bible against getting drunk. So we got no problem if people want to come over. Some people know that we're starting our own tequila line. And so people come to our house and we have the world's greatest margaritas. Well, guess what? Ammon's my friend. He comes to our house. They don't drink wine. They don't drink tequila because he's Mormon boy. and he's a good, clean one, and he's a true believer, and he's a good, clean, godly man. So for someone to accuse him of supporting marijuana, they're stupid. The reality is he's consistent in his position on liberty, that the government should not have a war on drugs. That what have been the results of that? The results of that have been an increase in drug use, and the greatest increase on what? Very specifically, the power of the state to take people's liberty away from them, and this huge explosion in the prison population. And who's getting rich off of that are Republicans and statists and private corporations.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It's true.
So anyhow, that was one I couldn't do a lightning round on, but anyhow, there you go. So let's hit the other ones.
Man, that was really good. That was really good. So, you know, you can pick any of these. I don't know, because I'm kind of up against, I got about 18 minutes, but
okay, we'll knock it out. Hit it.
It was obviously the legalization of pot, deportations kind of along the same lines as border walls. His support of BLM, you covered already. Why he moved from GOP to independent. I don't know that I feel like that's really important to elaborate on unless you do.
It's important to elaborate on. I will say this, though, and people aren't going to like this, but it's okay. I'll say it anyhow. Ammon talked to me about that. And from a strategic perspective, I think it was a great strategy. However, Ammon straight up told me that he felt that he was impressed by the Lord to make that decision. And if that's the case, that's the case. So if somebody wants to say, I feel God is calling me to do something, that's between you and God. If you tell me, Tom tells me, Diego, I believe God told me to take over the JBS, and I'm going to be now, you know, they're wanting me to be the top guy, and I'm going to go ahead and take that position. And you know, somebody might have reasons why you shouldn't, but you say, I feel God told me to do it. That's between you and God. I'm not going to judge what you say God is calling you to do. And so there's definitely no moral or ethical reason why he couldn't or shouldn't have done that. And so because it's not contrary to anything morally or ethically, good for him. He's following what he feels God's leading him to do.
Well, it was brilliant because of the fact that what you had talked about earlier, where once everything is under Republican control, people can only see one thing. And the idea that he escaped that not only puts him into the long haul. I thought it was a brilliant move, whether it was an appointment from God or whether it was just a savvy political move. I still think it was brilliant. It didn't violate any rules. It didn't violate any laws. But it seems like anything that people can't believe must think, oh, well, that's Ammon Bundy breaking the law again. In reality, you know, you can go back to all the court trials and you can go back to anything. You can watch all of his videos. And it's like, I don't think I've ever seen him raise a hand or even raise a voice to anybody that felt like they had to operate within their statist sphere of control. And I had openly stated the other day that he was a lot more, he had a lot better demeanor than perhaps I would have. And so
Sure.
I think dispelling all of this garbage is hugely important. So that was a great comment to make. He did go into talking about selling Idaho land. Now, some people are really concerned because they think, you know, and the other thing I wanted to mention too is that a lot of these things could arguably be beyond the gubernatorial sort of sphere of his position in government. And so I would strongly encourage that, because if people are going to focus on border walls as the number one issue, I would argue that that's way beyond the it
has nothing to do with an executive of a state that doesn't border Mexico. Exactly. I mean, it's just completely irrelevant. It just doesn't matter.
That's exactly right. And so he was talking about giving people back lands. Well, you have an issue where people are like, well, you know, we don't want the federal government to own lands. Well, the flip side of that, if we operate in true free market capacity, is to be able to make sure that either the states own the land, or that the people own the land, and that if people want to come here and to buy up land, if Diego decided he wanted to move back here and buy 50 million acres in Idaho, you know, somehow you're going to be able to do that, and somehow you're going to end up increasing the growth of Idaho.
So Ammon's, there's a complete response to that on Ammon's website that I'm not going to be able to articulate off the top of my head as well as that. What I will say is this, however, his plan, again, is completely consistent, not only with his personal belief system, but with the history of America. Consider when America first got started, right? When we first got started, and we had, say, the Louisiana Purchase, where Thomas Jefferson bought all this land. I think it was the greatest land purchase ever in the history of the world. Well, the government owns all that land. It later becomes states, et cetera. How does that land then ultimately end up in the hands of the people? So there's a historical reality that once land becomes sovereign land by a sovereign nation, that land is then reallocated to people. It's not, the government shouldn't pick winners and losers, but there's a way that land is then taken by the people and it becomes their property and it becomes their personal property and they move forward with it. And it is a very consistent process that we use in America that was absolutely fantastic. And it meant that the people with the greatest means of exploiting the land in a positive way so it's beneficial were the ones who ultimately ended up with it. And so historically, the exact same way that our country reallocated land to the people once they expanded westward, because people remember we were 13 colonies, now we're 15 states from coast to coast. It's the exact same way. So if someone has a problem with what Ammon Bundy's plan is, you have to say, well, you have a problem with Thomas Jefferson's plan? You have a problem with our founding fathers and the way that we expanded westward? Because it's the exact same plan.
They just don't know it.
The same thing.
Yeah. They just don't know it.
They just don't know it because they got a government education and they don't know anything.
Well, I got to tell you, he and I got a chance to kind of throw some hardball questions because I didn't want to be known as a softballer like the mainstream. But, you know, we had gotten into this deal with the businesses with forced vaccines, with the latest mandates and totalitarian edicts from your favorite governor. You
mean non-binary, Brad?
You know, right? Well, it was really important because it was about dealing with what Ammon believed that businesses could actually do as far as mandates for their employees. And so most people will say, well, you know, corporations shouldn't have the authority to be able to mandate anything on their citizens. And Ammon said, well, why not? You know, the only answer, if I remember this right, and you can correct me, the only right that the person had or the employee had is, you know, if you have an employer that put all of their money and sacrificed all of their time and all of their wealth in creation of their business, you can choose to work there or you could choose not to. And so I thought that was interesting because, to be honest, I had taken kind of a more moderate position only because I had not really thought about this completely. And I'm saying that because it's okay to be able to change your mind when you get more specific information that adheres more to principle. But that was a big deal for a lot of people because they're saying, well, if I work somewhere, I should be able to tell them what I don't want. And so I found that a very interesting position that he had. I wholeheartedly agree with it. What about you?
So the deal is, again, Ammon is being remarkably consistent. And this really just drives people nuts because people say, I want freedom. I want freedom. I don't want the government to tell me what to do, except when I have a position I want other people to take, then I want the government to force my opinion on other people.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even like it. When he talked about me, I was feeling a little, I'm like, I don't know.
Because people don't like it. And we don't like it because it became very real with the forced vaccinations, because I'm opposed to forced vaccinations. I don't want these forced vaccinations, but yet these are private entities, blah, blah, blah. And so that is a more hardball question in the sense that there's some details that matter. I don't know if you've seen the latest Amazon series called Reacher about Jack Reacher, but it's excellent. Yes. I think right wingers that you have seen it. If you have seen it, there's this big old monster dude, right? And it's a great little show to watch. But he says over and over again, details matter. He always says details matter, details matter. And so the detail in this whole argument regarding can corporations force people to do something? I mean, the answer is look, if you go to Wetzel's Pretzels over there at the Boise Mall, I mean, people are required to dress like complete idiots just to serve up pretzels, you know, and some people have to wear dunce caps and some people have to wear whatever. People do all types of stuff that their employment requires of them. I still have never been to a Hooters. If you have, you can enlighten me to what the experience is like. But I understand that these women are required to dress a certain way in those places. It's a requirement. So corporations have to be able to require people to do so, but they have to be able to make sure that that requirement is purely voluntary. There is a contract between employer and employee, and that contract is all that matters. In fact, the reason government exists partially is to enforce contracts between two parties. So if we say, hey, our contract says that you have to wear Magnum PI shorts and nothing else when you come to work. Well, you can't say, well, no, I can't. I'm not going to do it anymore. Well, look, you signed your name on the dotted line saying that this is what you were going to do. Yes, okay, I did say that. Now, here's the thing. If somebody if you have an agreement with a hospital, for example, that you work for, and a vaccine was never a part of your agreement, And now, in order to maintain your contract with them, in order to retain your employment, they're now changing the terms of that contract. Well, that's a breach of contract on their behalf. You follow? And so that's the whole point. Secondarily, the second point, of course, is that you cannot make the argument that hospitals are purely private, because they're not. They're government subsidized. Now, that's where the problem comes in.
Yeah.
But if I have a marketing company, in my marketing company, we make videos. And in my videos, you're the guy who shoots videos for me. And I say, hey, Tom, before you come work for me, you have to sign on the dotted line that says, we may require you to take vaccines from time to time, and it's a condition of your employment. And you say, okay, and you sign it. Then when the next scare comes out, when monkeypox comes out, because, Idaho Republicans are touching peepees with each other and they're passing around this disease, then all of a sudden, I say, hey, you got to get this vaccine. Well, guess what? You got to get it, or I can fire you because you signed that contract. And guess what? As an employer, I should have the right to sign those contracts with you. And that's the consistency of Ammon's position. Right. Ammon is not out there saying, hey, hospitals should be able to inject people, you should lose your job. He's not saying that. He's being consistent from the perspective of liberty-mindedness. However, again, people are very ignorant to what liberty is. And all they want is they want to be able to force their opinion on somebody else. And that is at the core of what's wrong.
I've got one thing that I think is going to provide a little insight on a different level that I've never heard anybody talk about. And as we finish up here, because I got about 8 minutes, I had mentioned my understanding of, and I don't know if it's okay to say here, but it's totally obvious, the global conspiracy, right? The part of environmentalism and Agenda 21 sustainable development that includes empowering corporations to become the new government. It was evident to see with mask mandates and things. Brad Little could say, hey, it wasn't me that locked the state down. No, but he actually empowered corporations to be able to do that. So I can tell you that there are elements of that where it exists. The question I had for you, as I did for him, was, and I learned a very valuable lesson here too, and I'm sharing that with people so they understand that I don't know it all. I mean, I'm up against this thing like everybody else does, trying to figure out how things work. But when the governments empower corporations that hire employees, what do you do then?
So then, because the government, but my answer is simple, and it's exactly what I just said. And I guess let me answer first, and then I'll back it up for why my position is that I am opposed to anything that comes from government empowerment. Therefore, if the government is empowering some corporation to put a mandate on somebody, then it's wrong, period, end of sentence, and I'm opposed to it. Now, that being said, I am a conservative. Some would consider me libertarian-minded. I don't like those categories. I don't believe in them. I consider myself a biblical free market guy. In other words, I believe in the free market. I believe the free market is a principle taught to us in the Bible, but I believe the free market has to be tethered to biblical morality. So that's my position. And, conservatism, libertarianism, republicanism, none of those isms fit how I would want to mold myself or cast myself. Therefore, I don't like those categories that people create. I consider myself a biblical free market believer. So that being said, and I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm also a businessman. I believe in the ability to profit and to make money in business. So I'm a huge believer in business and the free market. In fact, I've been on record saying over and over again, and people know that I believe that entrepreneurship and the free market is the solution to all the ills of the entire world. And I literally believe that. I believe that business owners and entrepreneurs do more collective good for society than churches and charities and religious institutions. I really believe that. And that's a hard thing for someone to say who was a pastor for a decade and am still an active minister. That being said, I am an active opponent to what I call corporatism. So people think that if you're a Republican and conservative, that we automatically support all corporations and anything that corporations do to make a profit. And nothing could be further from the truth. So if you take either Ludwig von Mises and his historical development, and you take, our good buddy, all of a sudden my brain fried on me really quick here, but he's the most popular right-wing economist. And he had a whole bunch of problems, in my opinion. And this guy, we all quote this guy, and all of a sudden my brain just fried out on me and I can't think of his name. But there's two things that this particular economist said, and you might be able to think of his name right now. He's the most popular economist of all time for our modern generation. My brain's fried, but don't worry about it. There's two things that he was in support of that I totally oppose. One of them is he believes that anything a corporation does for profit is okay. It's essentially moral to do anything for profit. And I totally oppose that. Because if you're doing something immoral for profit, then it's wrong, period. The second thing was that he supported withholding your taxes from your wages. Okay. Because he felt like that was the only way that you can make government work. I'm totally opposed to that. I think if we made everybody pay taxes, like you had to write a check to Uncle Sam, there would be a national revolt and we would all revolt against taxes. The only reason people accept taxation is because you never even see it. You don't even see it happen. But if poor people who are making minimum wage had to write a check for $150 every time they got a check and they had to write it to Uncle Sam, all of a sudden they'd all become conservatives, right? All of them overnight. Anyhow, I said that to say this whole concept of corporatism, where these corporations, these big corporations, use their power to manipulate society, to manipulate governments, to manipulate people. I just think it's wrong. It always has been wrong. And because there's always immoral activity that takes place in order for these things, for them to amass so much power. I mean, I believe it's in America. And all this comes down to the conspiracies that you want to talk about, that the JBS wants to talk about, that I got no problem talking about. But you take a look at food production in America. What is it? Like 80% of all food in America comes from 6 companies. Is that healthy for our future and our society? And we take a look at, the medical establishment and the medical cartel, that like 90% of everybody pushes the same narrative and does all the same thing and is forcing the same vaccines in our bodies, from births to medicines to whatever. We can go down the whole line. Corporations are being used by our government to destroy and manipulate the people. And we're doing it in America simply because Americans on the left, who are all statists, accept government. But those of us on the right, we don't accept government. We only support corporations. So the government's smart, go, all right, well, let's just secretly control the corporations behind the scenes, and then we control everybody. And conservatives have been bamboozled by corporations thinking, we'll let corporations do whatever the heck they want. There's one person in America who understands this and who's fighting against it. That's Ron DeSantis. And he's fighting against these corporations when they are abusing and manipulating their own power in immoral and unethical ways. And he's fighting against it. And there's conservatives opposing him, saying, no, we got to let these corporations do whatever the heck they want to do. Well, corporations can do whatever the heck they want to do unless they're using the force of government to manipulate or to give them an edge they otherwise would not have in the government. Like Twitter. If Twitter can shut you down because a government entity tells Twitter, shut those people down, and they therefore become an arm of the government, now it's wrong. Now, Twitter is in bed with the government. They are essentially and pragmatically an arm of the government, and they should therefore not have private corporation rights.
Amen. Well, Diego, I'm up against the wall here. I appreciate you visiting with me. I'd love to get a copy of this thing so I can help share it if you think it's worthy. Honestly, I don't care if it is or not. I just love seeing your happy face and listening to you, man. You've been vital to the movement. You're vital to the freedom in this country, and I'm just so honored to call you friend. And your family are some of the best people I've ever met. And so, I just do you have any final thoughts you wanted to leave before I leave? Before we terminate? My only
final thoughts are this: Idaho, this is your last chance. Ammon Bundy is truly your last chance to save Idaho. And if not, then I got good news. You got Plan B coming out to Florida. You can hang out with us and we'll preserve American liberty in Florida. But I would say stay the course, fight the fight, get Ammon Bundy elected in November. And if the worst thing happens, you got your Plan B. You got an open invitation to come visit us, Tom. So anytime you want to come out to sunny Florida and live it up with us, we'll show you a good time, my man.
I know you will, brother. I look forward to it. I look forward to trying your tequila too.
You're going to love it. It's the world's greatest, my man.
I'll bet it is. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, brother.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.